We are live once again for the Clean Power Hour. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, all our friends on Facebook and Twitter and YouTube. I'm Eric Meyer, Director of Generation Atomic. With me to my right, which is mirrored on the screen here, left, is David Watson, who runs our blog. David's going to be helping out at the beginning part of this because I realized, a few minutes ago that it would be weird if I was interviewing myself. I don't know why I didn't think of that before. But at any route, I'm going to go ahead and open up the slides for a half second here. And and this is how we do that. There I am. Okay, Clean Power Hour. Here we are, number 4. Playing the video. Good stuff. All right, and this is what we have here: live performances. One of our featured guests, Baba Brinkman, who wrote the Rap Guide to Climate Chaos. Super exciting. We'll be digging into this question of how do art, music, and creative writing help in the fight to protect the environment, to fight climate change. Good stuff. So welcome all who are able to join us today. Here are 3 guests, Baba, myself, Andrew Dana Hudson, climate fiction writer. The first of these people is me. It's very awkward. I'm just realizing now, but we'll figure it out. So I think maybe
Hey Eric, I can't see your slides on the Zoom. I don't know if that's
that. Yeah, and that's unfortunate for you, but for all of our good friends on the internet, they see a nice little.
Okay, good. Just checking.
No worries. Thanks for checking. So I think we'll start with just showing. I haven't even tried to. Yeah, let's see.
I wasn't really able to meet a lot of people who
my little
agreed
spot
with me
from
that nuclear needed
the
to be
new
a big part
fire.
of the solution.
Take a look.
Until I met Rowley and Yana. These guys get it. I'm glad to do anything I can to help them succeed in that goal.
Let's see. I can shape this a little better.
Listen, friends, to what I'm saying. We must stop playing with all our futures. This is the moment when we all decide to fight as one for the earth. Time is wasting, we must be hasty, or lose the chance to even decide it all. Tick tock, our species clock, winding down until there are no more seconds left.
I realized pretty early on that a lot of public opinion is vehemently against nuclear. I think what I've learned is that if you don't give people a chance to learn about this technology and change their mind, they never will.
Molten salt reactors hold tremendous possibilities for humanity. And if we build them, history will show it was the right way to go. Merci beaucoup.
Oh my goodness. All right. Oh wow. That's fun. There you go. Yeah, so that was my little spot from the new fire, which I think David got to hear but not see.
Didn't even get to hear it, but I've seen the film.
Okay.
Don't worry.
All right. Well, you can watch it on the stream later. Well, good deal. So obviously, I've been using music as part of my advocacy for a while. David, any thoughts on the film that you have seen, thankfully, and this approach in general?
Well, you obviously it was obviously of interest to David Schumacher, isn't it, who made New Fire? I think he found it fascinating that someone in a kind of a science arena would use music to try and get across a topic which is very controversial and can be quite complicated at times. So I guess, like, what is it that made you think that music would work? Did you come into music? Did you come into nuclear thinking you'd always use music, or is this something you came to later?
Yeah, I think if I had to figure out some origins, I think it was just, I care about this, and here's a skill I have. Let's put them together and see if it works. I have seen this kind of thing work in other venues. For instance, during grad school, I actually applied for a fellowship and got this fellowship to be a vocal performance master's student as well at the same time as my applied public policy degree.
Right.
And there was, at the last second, the program that was going to pay for both master's degrees lost its funding, but they still were continuing on with the show, which is called the Pirates of the Carrot Bean. And it was a kind of a...
That sounds amazing.
Yes.
I have no idea what that is, but that sounds great.
Yeah, you can see the hard T in there, and it's a program, kind of a pirate show for children about eating healthy. And I played the pirate cook, and I was singing a parody of the Pirate King from Gilbert and Sullivan. So, instead of, for I am the Pirate King, it was, for I am the pirate cook, I am a mistook, I am the pirate cook, and all about eating healthy and exercising. So I know that it can be a good way to bring a message to a broader audience than maybe the standard, here's a PowerPoint presentation about nuclear energy.
Right. And the environmental movement has always had its protest songs. It's always used music.
Yeah.
So I guess the eco-modernist side of environmentalism was kind of lacking something. I'd like to see more, really.
Yeah, me too. There's been a few really beautiful moments, I think, within our little movement, our little niche of the broader environmental movement, I guess. And, for one of those for me is the first stop on the March for Environmental Hope in California in 2016 was essentially breaking into the Sierra Club in Oakland with about 40 of us nuclear engineering students, power plant workers from around the country, and singing the Battle Hymn of the Atom, which is the same as the Solidarity Forever, the labor song, or Battle Hymn of the Republic, the old hymn. So that was one of those moments. Another one was when we got counter protested by some anti-nuclear folks crashing our meeting in the Netherlands, and rather than shaking our fists at them, we came out and sang "I Can't Help Falling in Love with You" and gave them flowers, and all they could do was smile and laugh and leave. So there's something disarming about a song, and any opportunity we have to bring it into the movement, I'm excited to take.
So how do people react when they hear your music? I guess how do the general public react, and then how do people who are potentially antagonistic react?
I think the initial reaction is surprise. If it's in France, like you saw in the video, and I'm singing in English, there's a bit of confusion going on. Like, this is a French opera. Why is he singing in English? And what the heck is a thorium? Probably the reactions there. But even amongst, there was one anti-nuclear rally at the climate talks in Bonn, COP23, that kind of stumbled upon when I was just trying to get a bite to eat with a friend of ours on a break. It wasn't even really on our radar, honestly. It was totally serendipitous, but I decided that I was going to hop up on stage right as it concluded, but before people had left, and sing a song about nuclear power. And I got applause. And then some people threatened to beat me up, and I got shoved around and spit on. And then the cops showed up and tried to take our camera away. But thankfully, I had one of the Mothers for Nuclear, a very strong, impressive woman named Ida there to prevent me from getting arrested or beaten up. And we made it out of there in one piece. But usually people are thankful for some music, and you don't see it every day. So yeah.
So you've sung a few of the COP, the Conference of Parties, which is the main United Nations climate event. You've sung at a few of them, and you've had some interesting experiences there. Why don't you tell us about what happened in was it Poland?
Yeah, Poland. In Poland, when I look back, it's always like maybe we could have done that a little bit different strategically. But I sang a couple songs towards the beginning of the climate march before it had actually started, and the organizers who had advertised it as being open to everyone didn't like our pro-nuclear message and asked the police to ask us to leave. So they're like, you guys, you can sing from across the street over there. So we we did that
because although it was a climate march, there were people there whose sole objective was to close the nuclear industry. Is that right?
Yeah. And it's
funny how these people get invited to a march about climate when what they're really interested in is something. It's not related to climate, and if anything, it's damaging to our decarbonization. So it's bizarre these people keep getting invited.
Yeah, it is. It is kind of interesting that how they can hold these, because obviously they care about climate change too, maybe just a little bit less than getting rid of nuclear power. We did. Some of our other people in our group went back into kind of snuck back into the march, if you can sneak into a march. But and talked to some of the folks waving, no nuclear no thanks flags, and said, do you guys think it was fair that they kicked the pro-nuclear environmentalists out? And they were like, no, that's messed up. This is for everybody. So it was really just kind of a really select group of people that complained and got us out of there. But what are you going to do? We're making progress. Yeah. So
can you think of an example of something that you've achieved with music that you just couldn't have achieved another way in words, even spoken words or written down?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think certainly that moment in the Netherlands when we got counter protested would have went a different way with words. I think there's still more work to be done with using music as an advocacy tool. So I'm ask me that question again in a year or two, and I might have a longer answer.
Yeah. So what's next for you in your musical nuclear journey? Are we going to see a full-length nuclear opera?
It's been on my to-do list for several years here. I have I think 7 or 8 songs that I've.
It's not like you're busy, Eric. Come on.
Parodied. I know. I really need to just spend a month and devote myself to this, because as we'll see with our next guest, when you're able to put together a live show like Baba Brinkman has and perform it at venues, you can really make an impression on people. So I hope to someday, and there's time travel involved in the story, and I have some rough outlines, but it hasn't come together quite yet.
Wow.
So maybe
looking forward to it already.
Yeah. Maybe we'll hear a thing or two from Baba, and he can give us some pointers on piecing it all together for a live show.
Great. Yeah. Look forward to it.
Awesome. Thanks so much for interviewing me at the last second, David. This has been great.
My pleasure.
Yeah. Awesome. Great. Well, I think at this point, Baba, if you want to turn your camera on and if Richard, who's running our slides, wants to screen share on Baba's slide there. Hi, Baba. Welcome. How are you?
Hey, great to be here.
All right, fantastic. I already checked if Baba was inside some kind of crazy shower, but it's a Japanese privacy screen. So just to clear up any questions we might have in the audience on that. Well, great. Well, welcome. Maybe we should just start by introducing yourself, telling us about how long you've been in this game, and how it started and where you are now.
Sure. So my education was in comparative literature. I did a master's in medieval studies and wrote my thesis on Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, and was also a massive hip hop head all the way through college. And so I started rewriting the tales into my own sort of rap style, and put out a record after I graduated called the Rap Canterbury Tales, and toured that around the UK for 4 years or so. Did the Edinburgh Fringe a couple times, and Brighton Fringe, and a whole lot of college campus gigs. And then at one point I was doing my Canterbury Tales rap at a college in Birmingham, and a evolutionary biologist saw it and said, "That was great. Now do you think you could do for Darwin what you did for Chaucer?" And I wasn't really thinking of myself as a science communicator. I wanted to be like a modern troubadour, resurrector of ancient stories kind of thing. But I love that challenge. I love Darwin. So I kind of took a dive into the culture wars and did this whole record called The Rap Guide to Evolution in 2009. And, within 6 months of somebody saying, "Let's do this," and me putting the record out and doing a bunch of performances around the UK, suddenly I was a science communicator, which had not really been a transformation that was intentional, but I had a great time with it. The scientist that commissioned it sort of asked me to send him the lyrics in advance, because one of the performances was going to be at one of his events, where there was a lot of evolutionary researchers across a bunch of disciplines, and he kind of didn't want me to misrepresent the science. So then when he introduced me for the first performance, he said, "Don't worry, he sent me the lyrics, I checked them in advance, and you're about to witness the first ever performance that's peer-reviewed rap." And I was like, "Peer-reviewed rap? That's wicked. That's my brand now." So that was 2009, and I started this whole series since then. Rap Guide to Climate Chaos obviously is one of them. People talked about whether we could get some anthems for eco-modernism. I didn't specifically reference eco-modernism but I did do a record called The Rap Guide to Wilderness, which, if you listen to it, has a pretty clear eco-modernist influence. I've done a rap guide to medicine, rap guide to religion, which is about a sort of naturalized anthropology of religious instincts and where they come from. The most recent is Rap Guide to Consciousness. And, I have referenced nuclear a couple of times in my climate rap songs, but always sort of treated it as, one of an array of, obviously we should use it, but sort of let the market and the demands and logistics of each energy mix determine like what balance. And mostly I've focused on carbon pricing in my Rap Guide to Climate Chaos show, because if you don't pollute for free anymore, then that balances things out, and I think investment will naturally flow to nuclear. But I also sort of didn't want to open that can of worms too strongly in the show, because I wanted to create as broad a tent as possible around the climate movement. And I guess, Eric, you can relate to that, being in marches where people have an array of agendas, but they all agree that addressing climate change is really important, and disagree about how. Mm-hmm. So now I've been coming back to the topic a bit and doing some more reading, and the challenge that you guys are talking about is right at the heart of what I'm trying to do. Figure out like what is the key in the lock of apathy and misinformation and prejudice and good faith, bad faith. Like how do you bring people around in a way that feels friendly and inviting and entertaining and fun, but when you scratch the surface, there's actually a lot of information and rhetorical power as well. That's what I'm trying to do when I write a song. And I like controversial topics: evolution, religion, climate change. the neuroscience of consciousness, which basically tells us that none of us have a soul in the traditional sense, and we better just get over it and think of ourselves as assemblages of robots. Some of this stuff is hard to get over psychologically, and I think nuclear has something in common with a lot of those topics. So, that's where I'm at right now.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for that. Yeah, I was just going to comment on that. For a lot of people, climate, at least within the environmental movement, climate change is not controversial. There's very much a kind of mainline thinking, which I think has been challenged quite a bit recently with the Planet of the Humans documentary that just came out. But you've been kind of raising questions about the mainstream narrative for a while now. Can you say a little bit about that?
Mainstream narrative in terms of like easy answers, or
because it does feel like we've been sold a little bit.
Well, I think like what my general agenda is with each of my projects is like debunking myths. And I come from a very leftist background and upbringing. I'm from Western Canada. My parents were members of the Green Party. My mom's now in the Trudeau Liberal government, so she's sort of gone through a centristizing metamorphosis, I guess, as well. But when I looked at it's the case with a lot of this stuff, actually. When it comes to evolution, the right gets it wrong on creationism, and the left gets it wrong on the blank slate. And the left thinks that all of our behavioral differences are coming entirely from learning and culture, and all we have to do is hack culture, and everybody's going to live in a utopia. And so there's not good science behind it. And you find, that there's a kind of like left and right misconceptions on a lot of these topics. I think it's the same with climate. So with the Rap Guide to Climate Chaos, I was, debunking the climate denialist right, but I was also debunking this sort of, easy answers, like all we have to do is recycle and clean up plastic straws and climate change is going to be solved, kind of complacency on the left. I put up solar panels, I bought a Prius, and now my job is done, because I think there's a real, like at worst, or at best, there's a lot of sort of useless posturing that goes under the name of environmentalism, but doesn't take into account the actual like IPCC numbers around the various contributions of different energy generation technologies, glass, concrete. Like where are the emissions really coming from? And most of it's not from things that consumers really have any leverage over, by choosing different stuff to buy. And yet how much of the noise people make around environmentalism comes down to like consumer advocacy and, or as they call it, like guilt-based advocacy, like feel really bad, clean up your act, like live in more poverty and deprivation, and everything will be fine. And it's a total pipe dream. So that like part of the show was about like wake up calls to the left around what really needs to be done, and wake up calls to the right about let's take the problem seriously.
All right. I think at this time we should show, because you make some really great music videos as well, and I think it would be fantastic to share a little bit. So I think Richard has screen shared, and if you can go ahead and go back a slide and hit play on that, Richard, that would be great.
You'll see me in my pre-quarantine beard days on this video.
Awesome. And we're going back and forth.
It is not playing.
Okay.
You can pull it up from YouTube direct and just full screen it as well.
Yeah. What's the YouTube link?
If you just type in Barbara Brinkman IPCC into Google, it'll be the first thing that comes up.
Okay.
Awesome. Yeah. And this is one of your more recent ones, I believe, but even more recently you did a COVID video, right?
Yeah, that video is in production. It's going to be ready in a few days. It's called Stay Home, and it's around all the epidemiological, reactions to COVID and how different interventions can change the curve and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
There we go. Now, just before you play this, I'll just preface it by saying, I recorded the track in 2005. I only got around to making a music video for it last year and released it in January of this year. So for a lot of people, this was the first introduction to the Rap Guide to Climate Chaos. even though I've been performing the show for years. And within a day of me putting the music video out, the official IPCC Twitter channel shared it with their whole set of followers. So as far as I was concerned, that was like, the ultimate peer review.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, hit it, Richard.
You want a new definition of hardcore? Check out the Intergovernmental Climate Report. It says the world is getting warmer unequivocally, and the oceans have increased 30% in acidity, and 90% of the warming trend is oceanic and concentrated in the Arctic. Nobody panic, but the level of greenhouse gases in the air is higher now than it's been in millions of years. We added more than 1 trillion tons of CO2 to the atmosphere. It's going to be centuries before some of the gas is clear. I'm dropping science, unvarnished, unbiased, but I don't blame you if your instinct is to deny it, because we evolved to prioritize immediate threats. If it bleeds, it leads. That's what the media says. So let the gangster-esque rap music paint a picture, and I'll hit you with evidence. Traps, floods, murders, thugs, chaos, refugees, stress, disease, extinction, disaster, IPCC, wars, famines, droughts, floods, earthquakes, murder, thugs, chaos, refugees, stress, disease, extinction, disaster, IPCC. Hollywood summer blockbusters can't touch this. I get my thrills from the latest reports published by
I think a nice taste of what we have there. Thank you for that.
My favorite part of that video, which was just a concept, and then I was like, "Ooh, I wonder if we can pull that off," is the hurricane scratch, where we got the DJ to cut up the exact record pattern that's on there.
What?
And then sort of edited the hurricane, so that's the DJ like playing God on the weather.
What? That's amazing. I had no idea. Wow, very, very cool. So what our audience is likely not to know is that you and I have been in some conversations about a song that maybe speaks to some of the ignored topics within the environmental movement, and topics that are maybe rising in salience lately. And that's kind of how nuclear power fits into this story, fits into this mix here. And tell me a little bit about the song that you've been working on.
Sure. So Eric, you gave me some suggested reading, Climate Gamble, which you narrated so eloquently, and Bright Future, and a bunch of articles and sources. And so I've been sort of like wading into this topic more. And Bright Future was the one that resonated with me the most. So I ended up calling this track Bright Future, and I'm trying to build a natural segue between the version of climate change I presented in the Rap Guide to Climate Chaos, and then sort of adding one more piece to the puzzle, which is like kind of, I don't think it contradicts anything I did before. It was just kind of like a missing piece, which is, yes, obviously nuclear is going to have to be part of the energy generation solution. And, anywhere there's a choice between fossil fuel and nuclear, we need to choose nuclear instead, at least.
Yeah.
If not a major build out. I'm not quite at the level of saying let's go all in for nuclear, worldwide, like Bright Future. I can see that as I think there's work to do before we're going to get the widespread sign off. So I hope this is a stepping stone towards that. But I think not shutting down existing plants that still have lifetime on them is, that's a first consensus position. And I'm just trying to tie all the threads together and also make it rhyme. There's a lot of sort of physics and atomic technology going on in the nuclear discussion, and it's always about finding the music and the words to create lyrics, bars out of it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I guess I literally finished writing this track yesterday, although I've been working on it for weeks. So there's never been a performance before. I got the beat lined up here, and I guess when we actually release the record, Eric, you'll be singing the hook. But I'm going to just do the hook spoken word style because I don't really carry a tune that well. So I'm not a singer, but yeah, so here we go.
Awesome.
Pull up the lyrics. Cool. How's that backing beat coming through?
We can hear pretty well.
Yeah. Blackout, blackout, too late to back out. From New York City to Krakow, no turning back now. We demand infinite power that never taps out, and demand the shutting of fossil fuel smokestacks down. Don't forget to ask how, and use every single tool. I got that solar bling on my roof that all my neighbors are thinking is cool. Renewables are beautiful, get them on every cottage, but the crucible is, can they get me to city level wattage? 10%, maybe 25 until the wind power dies. No flow from a hydro reservoir that a drought is dried until the sun sets on cloudy skies. Out of sight, out of mind. Old King Cole comes out at night until sunrise, when capacity surges, crashing the circuits. Batteries would be perfect, just too bad they don't work it. Plus the cost to purchase, it'll straight up double the pesos. So it's still left the fossil fuel to cover the base load. Come on, commuter, sky polluter, ride my scooter, climate movement, computer, Wi-Fi booster, fly juicer, hi-fi music. Clean energy means everything for bright futures, bright futures. Clean energy means everything, bright future. Yo, so here we go. Yo, what's a scenario? Some places have low emissions like France and Ontario. They embrace the technology that some people find kind of scary though. But the quality of life and economy there is very dope. Call it a bridge fuel or maybe the future of energy. Nuclear fission is your friend if carbon pollution is your enemy. Just check out what they did in Sweden. Low carbon emissions Sweden took the power grid and cleaned it safely. Ask a physics teacher. Natural background radiation is a ubiquitous feature. Uranium in every sea level of water. Brazilian beaches, radium hot springs keep me toasty. When I'm freezing, it's cold, it's really lethal, killing 500,000 people every year. After leaving, I'm choking, feeling a little wheezy. Plus the ash is more radioactive. Check your dosimeter reader, speaking on nuclear, and people do tend to get a little heated, but I don't give a millisievert about the haters. I'm still a keener, a commuter, a sky-high polluter, ride my scooter, climate movement, computer, Wi-Fi booster, fly juicer, hi-fi music. Clean energy means everything, bright future, bright future. Clean energy means everything, bright future. Wait, abundance. That's what happens when everything functions. 1 billion people today still have nothing to plug in. Every third of a second, another one comes in. No judgment. Just take the power production number today and double it. But every solar panel plan just keeps up with extra demand. So burn, baby, burn. Another natural gas plant. The air is a trash can for a fossil fuel when you're burning it. But frack that. We have a zero carbon alternative. It's so radioactive that we can't discuss it calmly. It's a nuclear reaction to a sensible energy policy. I'm afraid of a meltdown, but only psychologically in response to a technology that produces juice constantly. Is it safe? Compared to what? It's not as safe as fairy dust, but it causes less death than the other energy production areas. Solutions are various. Even with it, it's barely enough. So all hands on deck when a threat comes to bury us. Commuter, sky polluter, ride my scooter, climate movement, computer, Wi-Fi booster, fly juicer, hi-fi music. Clean energy means everything, bright future.
Bravo, sir. That was awesome.
All right, that's where it stands right now. I'm not going to commit to not changing any of those lyrics, but we're going to be laying it down pretty soon. So that's where it's at.
Goodness. Oh, man. Nicely done for, finishing it this morning. My God.
Yeah, you got my email at like 3 a.m.
Yeah.
Right? I got the full draft of the song finished just in time.
Yeah, exactly. Oh man, I've definitely done that before. I did a rewrite of the song "Clean Power Forever," which was originally about the experimental breeder reactor and like the origins of nuclear energy. And speaking at this EarthX conference, and I'm like, oh, I can't sing about that. That's too niche, man. So like literally on the Uber over to the venue, I'm like, and only screwed up a little bit of it. So yeah, well, good stuff. I think at this point we'll bring Andrew into the discussion, and we'll probably talk just specifically about his writing for a bit, and then we'll have all three of us for some audience Q&A after that. So thank you, Baba, and if you want to mute your video and then hop back later, we'll see you shortly.
Sure thing.
Awesome. Cool. Hey, Andrew.
Hey, good to see you.
Hey, good to see you as well. Great, and I'm guessing, Richard, can you do a screen share just so we can show have a little Andrew bio and very, very nice headshot. Let's see if we got this going here. There it almost is. Okay, if you can switch to the right slide, that would be amazing. Okay, great. Well, before that happens, perhaps you could just introduce yourself. I think you could probably do a better job than I could. So, yeah, tell us.
Yeah, I'm a speculative fiction writer. I sometimes call myself a climate fiction writer, and that's a sort of a distinction that I find very interesting, and maybe we can talk a little bit about what's useful there. I'm just wrapping up a sustainability master's degree at Arizona State University, which does a lot to embrace this kind of interweaving of humanities and environment, really embraces speculative fiction as a tool for thinking about things like climate change, our energy system, that sort of thing. Yeah, I'm kind of involved in a few efforts there. There's a center called the Center for Science and the Imagination that does a lot of really interesting work on producing and publishing speculative fiction that's really intended to kind of speak to real policy discussions going on, and talk about technology and the various futures that we might have ahead of ourselves in really sort of useful and kind of educationally impactful ways, often by pairing fiction with sort of nonfiction. And so Eric and I met at COP24 a couple years ago, which I was attending to do research on for my master's degree, my master's thesis, which I wrote a book that sort of imagines 5 different scenarios of the future of the COP, basically the future of the UN climate negotiations, in each of the different shared socioeconomic pathway scenarios that are some of the narrative scenarios that the IPCC uses, and or at least we'll be using in the 6th assessment report. So that has been my project for the last year. And now that's kind of come to a conclusion. I'll be seeing if I can bring it out into the world somewhere. It looks like Eric's got some of my other pieces up there. I had a story in Little Blue Marble, which is a very good Canadian publication of climate fiction. I often talk about and write about something called solar punk, which is I actually just got off a call with a bunch of solar punk folks. Basically, solar punk is a newish, burbling, nascent speculative fiction genre that kind of, to my mind, does for renewable energy and green technology and permaculture what cyberpunk did for computation and communication networks back in the 80s, which is sort of spin out a whole aesthetic, a whole countercultural aesthetic from the idea that those could be really ubiquitous. So, and then that little mammoth shot down there is from a story I had in Terraform, which is a Vice magazine publication of science fiction, and it's a very lyrical little story about a de-extincted mammoth named Roomba. if you wanted more of my stuff, I'll just sort of make that pitch now. I have a story out this week in Lightspeed magazine called Voice of Their Generation, which is it doesn't really have anything to do with climate, but it talks about algorithms and culture and that kind of thing. And I would also recommend the book The Weight of Light, which is one we did at ASU a couple years ago that has sort of imagining different possible design spaces for our energy future, and we're doing a sequel to that that we're hoping will be out later this year. That has some really exciting stories in it. So I think that about covers it. Did I miss anything, Eric? And of course, we also worked on a little bit on your climate game.
Yeah, and I think we'll touch on that in a second. I got a couple questions, I guess, but one is, can you kind of paint a picture for what you imagine a solar punk kind of future would look like?
Yeah, well, the way I try to think of it is try to engage with what are the sort of aesthetics implied. And I think comparing it to cyberpunk is really useful. Cyberpunk was a movement in science fiction in the 1980s that said, it's great to talk about these wormholes and time travel paradoxes and galactic empires, but actually we're missing discussing the technology that's really changing life right now, which is computation, right? And so we're kind of doing the same thing with energy technology, I think. And I think solarpunk comes off much more hopeful, much more not necessarily optimistic, but kind of wanting to imagine what it might look like if we made good choices. And so the result of that is I think that itself is kind of a countercultural approach to take in a world that feels very dire. And that's one of the things that I'm attracted to it. It often gets tied with a combination of Art Nouveau aesthetics with Afrofuturist aesthetics. Somewhere kind of in that area, it's very colorful. It's sort of sunny and green, where cyberpunk was kind of like a smoggy and neon and chromy. Everyone's kind of has a lot of greenery around them, is sort of doing gardening while maybe also doing some very high-tech stuff. I often say that it's plucky, where cyberpunk was gritty. So those are some of the differences, and it shows up differently in different people's works, and differently in different stories that I've done. I think there's often an interest in imagining that people can do really big things in the future in a way that we've kind of gotten away from, and that doesn't have to be scary, right? We can do kind of ecological mega projects and rebuild the Arctic after it melts, and some of those kind of things. And also there's a lot of kind of small communities of resistance and that use their infrastructure, and particularly things like solar power, as a way to as a form of resistance to various kind of nefarious forces that are impacting them. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. It kind of brings me back to that sort of central theme of the film Tomorrowland, which is that if we stop imagining that the future can be better than things are today, then it won't be. And that we actually need to go through the intellectual exercise of what a better future might look like in order to get there.
Carl Schrader, who's a Canadian science fiction author who I think is really smart on this, he recently posted something along the lines of people would prefer to live in a dystopia that they understand author, I think, is really smart on utopia that they don't understand, right? And so that, I think, is really where it becomes important to sort of do this active sort of visioning out, which we can do with lots of different tools, and speculative fiction is one of them. There's this devil no problem where if you feel like the world has a place for you in a future, you're more likely to go for that world, even if it seems terrible, even if it's a miserable place, than one that might be better, but you don't see the place that you could, how you would make your life there. So being able to show people just sort of through the power of through the particular tools that fiction brings, what it might feel like, what kind of memories do you make in that world, what your daily routine might be like, what are the sorts of drama and concern people have. I think that's one of the big opportunities there. And then there's kind of this exploring the design space, right? Because there are lots of different good futures that we could end up with, right? There are lots of different renewable energy futures or clean energy futures that we can end up with that have different combinations of power sources, that have different arrangements of those power sources in terms of where they're placed and how they're distributed and who owns them and who gets the profits. So asking all those questions and exploring those scenarios is, I think, a useful task of the humanities as much as it is of anyone else.
What are you hoping people who read your work, who engage with it, what kind of impact are you hoping to have? What are you hoping that they'll walk away with?
Well, I mean, I'm kind of like I usually try to be in my work like a fiction writer first and like an activist organizer second, right? So, I wanted to walk away with like wanting to read more of my stuff, right? Like having enjoyed the story, having it had an emotional impact, whatever one I was sort of intending. But, I sometimes talk about climate fiction and solarpunk as being a post-normal fiction. There's a post-normal science is a term that we sometimes use in sustainability that kind of says that, we can still do science in the sort of the realm of the wicked problem, right? Even, traditional science, normal science is one in which you can have experiments and test hypotheses and do peer review in kind of a Kuhnian way. And then there's kind of this realm of kind of more professional advocacy and advisory role that scientists can play. But as you sort of go out on these axes of high stakes and high uncertainty, you end up in this realm where the sort of originators of this idea called the post-normal science, where you're either stakes are high or facts are uncertain or potentially both. And that's a realm where often values are in dispute and we're trying to solve problems that we only get one shot at, right? Which is kind of the climate change is the definitional one of that. We only get one shot to save the planet here, and we can't run tests on other Earths to figure out what the correct strategy is ahead of time, right? So I think imagining that the stories we tell and the fiction we write is going to have an impact on that particular problem, on that wicked problem, and which is one that is to some degree narrative driven. It's driven by how people conceive of their future, how people stack the threats in their lives, and how people translate those feelings and understandings into political action or not. And so, post-normal fiction is this fiction that's trying to mobilize some amount of political action on something like climate, and is also trying to sort of recognizes that we have like a limited time to tell these stories. and and then if people really care about this stuff, don't tell these stories, and other people who don't care about them well. I always talk about Michael Crichton's State of Fear, which is maybe the most read work of climate fiction of all time, right? Even though it's a climate denier book, but it had a huge impact on the climate debate when it came out. So we need to sort of recognize that space is going to get claimed either way. That's kind of my general spiel on that. So I hope that people, there is this kind of like mobilizing towards reimagining the future and also towards political activity.
Yeah. Well, I was certainly impressed with the kind of universe you were able to build in just a few sentences when we were working together on Climate Chaos. That's a board game that still in development. We kind of it's kind of been a little bit on hiatus since we tested it in last August at Idaho National Labs, but kind of restarting development, getting things going again, because I feel like there's so many things we feel like we don't have control of, especially now with the pandemic. It feels like we need some agency. We need to reclaim some control, and perhaps a board game is a way to do that, and a good way to tell the story of what the future may hold, depending on our choices over the next few decades. To highlight a little bit of that, we on one of our slides here, we have, and I'm just gonna zoom in a bit here, but we have some of the text that you've written. We can see on this one, it says, I'll just read it real quick. So this character, by the way, is one of the climate scientists, one of the roles you can play. And they have the ability to kind of see what disaster is coming up next, so that you as a player might be able to adapt to it. And so it says here, I was watching at the regional WMO center when Typhoon Kujira turned, like a beast smelling prey on the wind, smelling Sendai. I felt it look our way and turn. This atmosphere is so dynamic that can happen anywhere. The storms aren't just bigger now. They're hungrier too. It's just like some gravitas to that. So made it very dramatic to play that character, to play any of these characters. And there's I guess I took two screenshots of the same thing actually. But here's a picture of our climate scientist character. So they are. It's very cool, and then we had some great flavor text in there as well. I thought so. Looking forward to keeping working on this game, getting it to a point where we hopefully a publisher will be interested in publishing it, because this is other than COVID, it seems like this is one of the topics of our time. So once we all inject some bleach and we take care of this thing, then we can go back to worrying about some other problems. Well, I really appreciate you being here and sharing that with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I think we'll welcome back Baba for a little bit and take a few questions if we have some from the broader feed, and if not, I can probably think of a few that might be universally relevant. Let's see. I'm just sliding a couple things around here as well on my screen. It's always fun live producing things. Okay, there we go. Alrighty, awesome. Well, maybe first of all, ask Baba, did you have any questions for Andrew? This is the first time you guys have met each other. I just want to give you an opportunity to weigh in here.
Yeah, I guess I have similar struggles, I guess, to climate fiction, but it's usually distilled down into a few bars, because you're entertaining scenarios, and you have this balance to strike between like how imaginative you want to let yourself be, and the challenge of bringing people along with you. So I haven't had a chance to read some of your work yet, but just I'm kind of curious about how you like walk that knife edge, and you know, what the response is from people in terms of the relatability versus the I never could have thought of that factor.
Yeah, I guess what I'll say is I think there is something different about writing climate fiction than writing science fiction, right? Which is often the more sort of mind blowing you can make it, the better. And for me, the sort of key, there's a theory of social change in all speculative fiction that's sort of like implicit. And in science fiction, the theory of social change is that social change is driven by science and technology. And that we're going to invent new stuff, we're going to discover new scientific principles, and that will sort of like lead to particular kinds of development that shape the rest of society. And climate fiction says, well, actually we don't have to use that theory. We can use a different theory, which is that the key driver of social change in the next century is going to be climate change. It's not going to be the gadgets we invent that shape people's lives. It's going to be where they live, where it's too hot to go outside, where the storms hit, mandatory evacuation orders, the asthma rates, like the crop failures, like all those sorts of things that we know are coming. Like that's going to be what shapes where and how people live. And so if you can, for me, the goal is to kind of like help people start to think in that way, as opposed to think of the future as like a series of progressively more elaborate gadgets or technologies, right? Even though we're probably going to have some degree of both. I see a question in the chat. Should I jump on there?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, Kenji asks, can speak to the process of developing specific characters in your stories. I don't really have anything to say on this that is like more insightful than any other fiction writer might say, right? I think, for me, I try to imagine what the debates are going to be at different sort of future points. We will change our material situation, but we're not going to stop arguing. So what are we going to be arguing about in 30 years and 60 years and 150 years, and how is that going to be different depending on what path we take from here to there? And having people stake out positions in those arguments is for me a good way to sort of make characters interesting. Mm-hmm. But I'm really excited to get to like hear some of your new work, Baba. I actually was like a big fan of yours like a long time ago. I think like back in 2010. I was like writing like a hip hop. I worked at a small newspaper in rural India, and my boss let me write a hip hop column, and I think I reviewed one of your albums back then.
Really?
Wow.
What was
what
was the publication called?
It's the newspaper called Sikkim Now. I don't know if they're even around anymore, but yeah. And I don't know remember what I said, but this has really sparked some interesting memories. So yeah,
you're gonna set me off to Googling after this, I think.
That's awesome. I guess David from Generation Atomic here had a question. Go ahead, David.
Yeah, I had a question for Andrew. I haven't heard of solar punk before, so I'm kind of intrigued about it. Is it you talked about utopianism, so is it an inheritively kind of positive outlook on the future? And if in all solar punk have we had catastrophic climate change? And so, if so, how do you maintain a kind of positive utopian vision for that catastrophic future?
I think solar punk is quite diverse in its, in what people who identify their work as solar punk take on it. Some, in some cases it's like oh, we stopped it, right? Or like we're on the other side, but we fixed it, and we're now in this sort of utopia where we're sort of sensibly managing ecology and that kind of thing. And what does that look like? And then there's lots of stories, and I've written some of these that are like trying really, like people really struggling to try to walk us back from the cliff, right? That like in our present world where we're careening just as fast as ever into this disaster, but you know, what are the stories of people that are, you know, maybe not utopian, but can like are trying to really make something work? You know, what are the struggles on the way to a utopian future, or what are the struggles on the way to resolving the climate crisis or managing the climate crisis? So, you know, I think it runs the gamut, right? And it's not always utopian. Sometimes it's merely like there's possibility here, and sometimes I think, you know, I read and written some sort of punk stories that are like pretty grim, but still kind of like engage with some of the tropes of that particular subgenre and the concerns. So it's kind of all over the place. But you know, the quote that I always come back to is Václav Havel. You know, sort of talks about the difference between optimism and hope. And he says, like, optimism is the belief that everything's going to turn out okay, right? And that's not hope. Hope is the belief that something makes sense regardless of how it turns out, right? So I think that's kind of what solar punk often tries to do. Is like, we may be doomed, but what would it look like if we were to try at least to find the narrow sliver of possibility where we aren't doomed?
Right. That's interesting. And would you say it's more focused on
no, that like a path, a series of choices make sense regardless of how they turn out, right? That
okay.
You know, you should sort of do the right thing even if you end up losing.
Okay.
That kind of thing.
So it's a bit more quixotic. Okay, cool. All right. Well, I was going to ask both of you what gives you hope, but now I'm thinking I should ask what makes you optimistic for the future? Is there any developments you've seen recently? And maybe we'll start with Baba, bring him back in here. Anything you've seen recently? I mean, you've observed a lot about society in general and psychology that go much broader than the climate question. So can we feel good about the future, or can you give us something to cling on to?
Well, I think there's hope in the fact that people are staking out territory they never did before and defending it. I think there has been a thing for a long time around like things that you're not supposed to say, and now is a good time for people bursting that bubble and sort of like the fact of becoming unpopular for defending a position, whether it's nuclear, whether it's the sort of evolutionary psychology view of human nature, which some people see as bleak, but has I think a good evidence base, or whatever it is that will outrage some people. I think I notice more and more, and maybe I just noticed this because I'm like a Twitter lurker, seeing people, speaking up on things that just seem like that's a sensible position to defend. And, even 10 years ago with the new atheists saying, let's all just be honest about the fact that we don't think there's a God, even if that's offensive to people that do think there's a God. Like that felt like a complete paradigm shift in public discourse, because it really had been a, don't admit it in public thing. And I think that, that like analogy that Richard Dawkins used, where he's like, let's treat being an atheist as like being homosexual was in the 80s. Like, we got to come out of the closet if we are. You can come out of the closet as a nuclear proponent. You can come out of the closet as lots of things that, that's what builds, conversation space around this. So I see that as optimistic, although it's not like there's not pushback, right? It's like, it's just a recognition that these fights have to be had for the world to move on from them. So
Right.
can't avoid them.
Yeah. Andrew, did you want to take a stab at that one as well?
Remind me the prompt.
Is there
The question?
Looking around here, are there things that you think give you optimism for the future and should give us optimism for the future?
I mean, I think as bleak as things are, and I read a really good piece the other day that sort of coined the term "new bleak" to describe our present circumstances. It is very intriguing to see how quickly our society can change when we want to, and how the kinds of resources we can mobilize to tackle a very imminent crisis. And I don't know if that should necessarily give us a lot of hope for climate change, because the problem of climate change has always been one of reckoning with the scale. But that there's still kind of now like proof of concept that we can mobilize in this really powerful way. I think the other thing is like just the like incredible trending down of like how cheap solar energy becomes, how cheap a lot of kind of clean power are becoming compared to fossil fuels, and how valueless fossil fuels are increasingly being seen as. I mean, some of that sort of negatively priced oil is some like quirks of the market kind of thing, but there's never been a cheaper time to buy up and shut down the fossil fuel industry and save the planet, right? So that's an example. Like, we could do it for $500 billion, and that's peanuts compared to what what a lot of us have imagined stopping climate change might take in terms of the total amount that we'll have to eventually spend. So who knows? If anyone's got $500 billion lying around, talk to me. Got some ideas.
I haven't heard that number before, and I'm curious. Maybe we'll pick that one up after the call here. But yeah, I mean, I think the broader point is correct, that compared to the long-term costs and impacts, I mean, can you put a price tag on literally every vertebrate species in the ocean? I'm guessing it would be, if you could, it would be a bit more than $500 billion. Just say, I don't think you can though. Yeah, well, thank you for that. We have another question here for both of you. We'll start with Bobby here. What advice do you have to other creators out there that want to use their voice within the clean power movement?
Well, my advice for how to be an artist in the world has changed a lot in the last 2 months.
Just don't.
People used to ask me, like, how do you make it as an artist? And my advice was always, like, get in front of an audience. You don't know if something's going to work unless you try it on a crowd, and then you see how they react, and then you fix what doesn't work about it. And I frankly don't know what the arts looks like moving forward until there's a vaccine and people start congregating anymore. I see people doing like live stream performances, and it's just the technology is not there to make it feel like a room full of bodies. And my entire like existence as an artist and a musician and a performer is entirely oriented around like, what will this feel like when I kick it live? So I just don't even know what I'm doing anymore right now. Except, as you said, like, music videos are a thing that's always been, okay, well, I'll make songs and I'll do them live, and then I'll also make a music video for those who can't make it to the live show. So I guess I would say, like, make stuff and put it out there, and you can do it in raw form and just, get feedback digitally, but there's no substitute for how it affects people, and there's no way to find out unless you put it out there for them.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good or the existing. I think there's a lot of people that are afraid to fail to the degree that they never even give themselves a chance to do it. So yeah, I would echo that. And Andrew, you want to say anything about that? Can you work out there?
Yeah, sure. I guess I would say, I think the best work on these issues, on climate issues, comes from people who are like really engaged with the science and the politics of it, right? Mm-hmm. And who have put a lot of time into being an organizer, being an activist, being like a voice, not just through their sort of creative work, but outside, right? And when you do that, you kind of like learn the contours of the question and the details, and like the devil is always in the details, and the story is like the most interesting stories are the ones where you get to dance with the devil a little bit, right? So being able to go a little like deeper and as opposed to just sort of and trust that like just the world needs your body, your voice, your time on these issues as much as it needs your creative work, right? And so doing both will make both better.
Yeah, well put. And I'm in agreement over here. I'm hoping that the community that watches these streams and even more broadly will feel empowered to do some of this, because I think we need to at this point in the broad spectrum, the broad timeline of humanity, we need to be innovative in both our approaches to generating energy and distributing that energy to the people who need it, but also in the way we communicate about it. That's why you guys are on this the stream today. So I feel like you've both been doing some amazing work doing that. I just want to thank you guys again for taking the time with us today. And I put your links out there for people watching on Facebook. And I'll put them in Twitter in a second. bababrinkman.com, andrewdanahudson.com to find your works and support them. And I think we end every one of these sessions with a call to action for the audience. This one, as I think I've definitely spoken to both of you about in the last month, is something weighing on our mind is just in 5 days here, New York City and downstate New York will begin a 2-year process of losing 80% of their carbon-free electricity. It's something we want to call attention to as a kind of a cautionary tale. I mean, there's still some hope that it could be changed, but we're also having we're calling it a Connect the Dots protest, where lots of folks from all around the world will be video calling into a socially distanced protest that's happening at a natural gas plant that's going to be a lot busier once the nuclear plant shuts down. And that's on the 30th. So stay tuned for more about that. And our call to action is on that subject. I believe, let's see, I think I have to drag some things around. Richard, do you want to, well, let's do, before we do that, one final, round of applause for our guests. Thank you. And I think Richard's gonna join us to talk about this call to action. And Richard, is your microphone on? I don't hear you yet. Or Christian was going to do it? I forget. Okay, we're getting some kind of staticky web problems here. Okay, dragging stuff around. All right, Christian, do you want to give it a shot? I'm not hearing Richard very well.
Can everybody hear me?
Yeah, there we go.
Cool. Yeah, so as Eric said, Indian Point was a really vital clean energy resource for the state of New York, and NYC specifically. And it is really tragic that it's closing. But we just want to make it known to Governor Cuomo and state legislators that there is a wide base of people who really disagree with this decision. And that if there's any chance of it reopening in the future, that there is a broad base of support for the continuation of that plan. And as Eric said, it's kind of a cautionary tale for these states who are maybe looking at decommissioning other plants or maybe considering building new ones. And we just want them to know that the nuclear community is very active. So what else was I going to say? Anyway, you can just go to this tool on One Click Politics. It's very useful. It allows you to look up your address, and it will send a letter to Governor Cuomo, and it will just it brings up the letter that it's going to send via email, and you can make edits to it to insert your own language into it and personalize it and make it more personal. And so we would appreciate you using this. As you can see, 86 people took this action. Oh, I wanted to mention, people are celebrating this closure as if it's very popular, but there was a video about it on YouTube, and there was something like, I think the amount of dislikes was like 300 times the amount of likes. So there is a broad base that is disagreeing with this. And so if you could go use this tool, we'd really appreciate it. We appreciate every action that's taken. So with that, I'll just give it back to Eric.
Awesome. Thanks, Christian. Yeah, so you see, 86 people have taken time to contact their legislators. I just checked the petition. It's almost up to 8,000 signatures. That's awesome. Obviously, that's a little easier for people to do on an international scale. You're not actually contacting New York lawmakers, so that's good. And then there's in the chat also a post for Climate Coalition. They have an open letter going. So all those things to help raise awareness here, and maybe we can save some clean power in New York. All right, and with that, I think that's all we have. That'll wrap up our session today. Thanks again, guys. Thank you to everybody. Thanks, Kenji, for helping on the back end. And yeah, if anybody ever wants to turn their videos on for a second, these are people working in behind the scenes to share the screens and all that good stuff. Yeah, you guys have a great rest of your weekend. Stay safe out there. Keep doing all the advocacy, caring about the future, and I think we can make it a better place. So thanks again, and take care.